classes thrown in there. We're not going to ask you to write a class since I've really just... Yeah, this is going to be fun. Okay, so I can see my announcements just fine. There is not going to be, we're not going to ask you to write a class. We would just ask you to, we might give you a class and ask you to reason about it. Maybe talk about the methods, the return types and the methods, or something like that. We're not going to really be quizzing you on static aspects because I just introduced that last time, and obviously it's a bit more, there's a lot more to deal with that. The test is cumulative, of course, so we could ask you, anything from the first third of the semester is fair game as well. Realistically, we're not going to be asking you much about expressions or using objects or anything like that. All right, let's see if this projector decides to come back up online. There will be a review session tonight at 7 p.m. I might be like 5 minutes late. It'll be at 7 p.m. at Olson 009. It is a question and answer type review session. Again, I'm not really going to have anything prepared, so please bring questions to ask. I will do my best to answer any and all questions. I will not have looked at the test until after the review session, so I'm not going to modify my answers because I know such a question will or won't be on the test. Let's see, there is no homework due this week. Obviously, there's an exam on Wednesday and a quiz on Thursday. There will be a homework due a week from this Friday. That's going to be the first homework on the course project. And I'll actually give you a demo of the course project either this Friday or next Monday. I have a good amount of the code written. There's a couple more things that I still have to prepare. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? So, homework 6 was probably not the most popular homework we've ever given in this class. And in fact, I got some very interesting comments, including a surprising number of curse words that I usually don't get on the comments, and various other suggestions that were made. So my goal in this class is to work you hard, but not to cause a huge amount of frustration. And if it did cause you, well, I mean, obviously there's always going to be some frustration involved in taking classes. My goal is not to, I'm not sitting here trying to think, how can I frustrate these guys the most? So if it did cause you a lot of frustration, I apologize for that. That wasn't the intent. I think the biggest thing that threw everybody off was the character counting method. At least from chatting with the TAs and the people who showed up to my office, that seemed to be the biggest problem. Let's reset the mouth on that one. What would have worked best is if we had already seen arrays, and then it's a very easy way to go about doing this. We haven't seen that yet. So we will work better on making the homeworks somewhat less frustrating. I think the project homeworks, meaning the next 3 or 4 homeworks, won't really run into that problem, mostly because we will have had the entire course project done ahead of time, and then hopefully we can focus more on just the explanations and the homeworks. So if it did cause you a huge amount of frustration, my apologies. We'll work better on that. Yes?
Did you figure out which games?
Yeah, we're going to be doing the Oregon Trail. Or well, that's a lot of excitement. We're going to be doing a highly modified version of the Oregon Trail. Again, I'll be demoing that for you in either this upcoming Friday or next Monday. Yes?
What happened to the Wumpus?
Oh, the question was what happened to the Wumpus? In the votes, this class, meaning 101, rated the Wumpus and Oregon Trail pretty much equal. 101E rated the Oregon Trail, so this class had the Oregon Trail slightly higher, but close enough that I could kind of ignore the fact that it was all that much higher. But 101E really liked the Oregon Trail better. So being it's the same homework for both, we decided to go with the Oregon Trail. And at this point, I've written most of the code for it, so we're definitely going with the Oregon Trail. Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, yes.
The clickers on the website, did you?
Yes, I said I would try to get the clicker information up on the website. I'm having a bit of trouble extracting that information from the program. You notice the program likes to crash every time I use it here. So it is forthcoming. It will be coming very, very soon. I hope, assuming it doesn't crash. It actually, believe it or not, my computer decides to crash every time I take out a docking station because of the software that I installed. Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so I wanted to spend today doing some review for the test. And again, I essentially wanted to do a Jeopardy review again because I think it ends up getting the same amount of material across. At least I have a good time doing it. Hopefully you do, but entertaining myself, I suppose, in many ways. So I was going to spend some time doing a Jeopardy review as well. Oh, funny aside. So how many people got the email about dunk your favorite professor? Yes. Apparently I got the most number of votes of anybody in the engineering school. So on April 11th, at a pre-appointed time, yes, you can come and dunk me. The two caveats. I'm an ectomorph. If it is cold and I get wet, I'm going to catch hypothermia, and I told them that I'm pretty much going to go get my space blanket and run inside if it's really too cold because I don't really want to die. The other thing is everyone who nominated me has to then fund whatever. Do we even know? Does anybody know what this is actually supporting? But whatever it is, all those who nominated me have to go buy some tickets. I have no idea who did it, but all right. So Jeopardy. I wanted to spend some time going over Jeopardy. We'll do a review, have a good time, and you'll all go home thinking that you'll ace the test. So first, I need 3 players. In particular, I thought we should do different players than last time. Just to give all 200 of you a chance to eventually get through Jeopardy between this test and the next test.
Or we can have the same thing.
Volunteers to play.
Or we can have...
Did you play last time?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can get someone else. Did you play last time? Do you want to play? One of you volunteered, so one of you can play.
No one has volunteered. No
Okay.
one's volunteering.
So nobody wants to play Jeopardy. You played it last time.
Yes, I did, but no one wants to.
Okay, we have 1 player. Come on, anyone? It's not that bad, is it? Okay, Ross. 1 more person. Well, this is going to be a really quick review session. Do you want to play Jeopardy? Okay, come on up. I need a scorekeeper who can add because I certainly cannot. And I need a buzzer. Who'd like to be the buzzer? All right, one of you two, because you nominated him. So one of you two gets to do it. Yeah, you can be the buzzer. Come on. Okay, here's an eraser right over there. Oh, let me get to that in a second. Okay, let's meet our players. Player number 1.
Yeah, I'm Ross Powers.
Ross Powers. Player number 2.
Kyle Hawk.
Kyle Hawk. Player number 3.
Daniel Miller.
Daniel Miller. Okay. Our buzzer is
Mark Miller.
Mark Miller. Are you guys related?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Maybe just. And our scorekeeper is. What's the last name? Verma. Okay, and audience 2. Okay. So you know how it works. You basically got to slap, and if there's any confusion, then it's all up to you as to who. They slap. Okay. So. The audience. Ryan. No, it'll just be among those 3, and then if they can't figure it out. Okay, no doing this.
What?
Yeah, that's supposed to be 6 hours.
Yeah, I can come up with the 6 categories. Okay, so a couple of these questions. I had originally created all of these Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to chat with the tech support staff. Don't go anywhere. So, we're going to have to improvise a bit. I'm going to tell you the categories, and I'll probably make a selection for you, and then when the projector comes on, you can pretend like there wasn't any odd way of playing Jeopardy. In particular, some of these questions, I had originally created these questions a semester or 2 ago, and you're going to notice 1 or 2 of these questions are things that won't quite make sense. Just bear with me. How about while loops for 100? Okay. When a while loop will stop executing?
When it gets to the system.exit.
So the answer was when it gets to the system.exit. Yes, it's not quite the answer I was looking for, so I'm going to do a push on that. Anybody else?
Was at the end of the bracket?
That's close, but not quite it.
It will stop executing the first time the condition is false.
Yes, remember that when the condition is false, then the while loop will stop executing. I think we won't take off points for them because their answer was sort of close. So remember that when a while condition is false, when the condition is false, that's when it actually will stop executing. Okay. Miscellaneous for 100. The difference between plus plus I and I plus plus.
Plus plus I takes I and then adds 1 to it, and I plus plus. Which one did I say first? I plus plus takes I and then increments it by 1, and would print out the unincremented version. Plus plus I would increment it and then print it out.
Well, the answer is right. I'm sorry, that was not in the form of a question. So that's minus 100.
Well, I gave you all the answers. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, plus plus I increments I by 1 and then prints it out. I plus plus prints out I and then increments it by 1.
Well, also correct. I'm sorry, that still wasn't in the form of a question.
Oh my god.
Kyle?
What is plus plus I adds 1, increments it, and then prints it? Where?
Yes. Right. Well, I assume you can repeat what I said. Okay, the difference is plus plus I will first increment I and then read the value. I plus plus reads the value and then increments I. So if it was in a print statement, plus plus I would increment it first and then print out the incremented value. I plus plus prints out the original value and then adds 1 to it. Right. Blah, 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 everything I said. Okay. Kyle, I think you got that one. Pick.
How about miscellaneous for 2?
Quick, before the projector dies. This is when variables in Java are automatically initialized.
What is when they're inside of a class but outside of a method?
Correct. So keep in mind that Java will initialize any class variable or instance variable, meaning something declared as part of a class but not as part of a method. It's worth 200. When something is declared as part of a method, Java gets lazy and doesn't initialize it. Okay. Right. Blah, blah, blah.
Let's go for loops for 100.
How many times and when the for init part of a for loop is executed?
What is only once?
How many times and when?
At the very beginning.
Yes, so remember that of the 3 parts of the for loop, I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, it will execute the first part, I equals 0, for example, once and only once, and at the very beginning.
For loops 200.
How many times and when the for update part of a for loop is executed? That's the 3rd part of the for loop.
What is at the end of the loop every time it reaches the end?
Yes. So remember that the last part of the for loop, the I++, for example, will execute once at the end of each loop, or at the end of the loop body. So I was told that the Ig Nobel Awards was a category on Jeopardy recently, and they all missed it. Like it was I think one person got one of them right, and all the other ones they missed.
Over 304 loops.
When, for each iteration of a for loop, the Boolean expression is evaluated. Okay.
What is it in the beginning of the loop?
Correct. So at the beginning of each iteration of a for loop, it evaluates that expression and checks to make sure that it's true. If it's true, obviously it keeps on going.
While let's change it up.
Given while P and Q, the negation of the while condition using De Morgan's law. Daniel.
What is while not P or not Q?
That's correct. So keep in mind that De Morgan's law, when you negate an and, it changes to an or.
200.
200. An and changes to an or, and both of the operators, the operands, P and Q, get negated. So P and Q becomes not P or not Q. Similarly, if you have P or Q, the P's and Q's get negated, and the or becomes an and.
While loops for 300.
When, for each iteration of a while loop, the Boolean expression is evaluated.
What is at the beginning of the loop?
Can you clarify?
Before it actually starts going into the loop, it evaluates it. And then it false skips the loop.
It's not exactly, I'm going to have this be a push. So essentially, I think this is what you meant, but it's not exactly what you said, so we'll count one or the other. A while loop is like a for loop. It checks the condition at the beginning of each iteration of the loop. So every time the loop starts over again, it's going to check the condition and make sure it's true. I think you probably won't count that.
Do whiles for 100.
How many times a do while loop will iterate if the condition is initially false? Daniel.
What is once?
That's correct. So remember that a do while loop says do, then your block and your commands, while some condition. If that condition is true, a do while loop will still go through the loop once before it even realizes the condition is false.
Do whiles 200.
When a while loop can be translated into a do while loop. Yeah, this is one of those things that it was something important to review, but I couldn't word a Jeopardy question around it very well. Okay, audience? Anybody?
Don't over that.
Oh, just call it out. I'm sorry? Flag. Right, because you're putting in the Boolean flag from the example. Essentially, any time is the answer. And the example I gave over that he was mentioning is that you just put an extra Boolean condition in there. So essentially, you can always change a while loop into a do while loop. And you can always change a do while loop back into a while loop. And the example I gave is you just add an extra Boolean variable, and it's very easy to change. It's on the slide somewhere in the other. Sure. Yes, there's two on the question. Okay, audience, pick a category. Miscellaneous for 300. The value assigned to Boolean b when b is declared within a while block.
What is true?
I'm sorry, that's incorrect. I'm sorry, that's also incorrect.
What is uninitialized?
Wait,
So remember that any time a variable is defined within a method, so that is 300. Anytime a variable is defined within a method, even if it's defined immediately within the method or within some loop inside the method, Java will not give it a value. It just doesn't initialize it unless you specifically give it one. Give me a second. Okay. So let's do do-while loops for 300. Where the Boolean condition is in a do-while loop. What is at the end? Remember that the way a do-while loop works is it says do curly bracket, you have your statements, however many you want, close curly bracket, while, then some condition.
Is that wherever we are? Or never mind.
I'm sorry?
We just get four.
Okay.
Do wherever we are.
For loops. The scope of a variable declared within the for inits part of a for loop. Remember, the for init part is the first part. So if I say for int I equals 0, blah, 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 it's asking about the scope of that variable. Yeah, this is one of those things that is much easier to read than be lectured on. If I was to say for int I equals 0, I plus plus something, 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 the int I equals 0 part is declaring a variable. What's the scope of that variable? Where is it visible? Is that helpful? No.
Wait, wait. Is it,
I think
Daniel?
what is only inside the loop?
If I had that code for int I equals 0, I is less than 10 or whatnot, where is its variable I visible?
What is only inside the loop?
Right. So this variable here is visible only inside this particular body. Remember, this is called scope, or where variables are visible. If you actually declare it here in the for init part, which is the first part of a for loop, it's visible anywhere within this particular loop body. Question?
A few questions ago, where we had the variable initialized inside a method.
Uh-huh.
You tried to print that variable when the variable does not exist, but doesn't get a garbage button or whatever.
The question is, what happens if you declare a variable inside a method and don't initialize it and then try printing it, correct?
Yeah, that doesn't exist, right?
Java will actually not compile it because you can't, Java will not allow you to print a variable that's been uninitialized. So if you declare a variable somewhere inside a method and you try printing it, Java will actually give you a compiler and say variable B might be uninitialized or something like that. So it actually won't allow you to compile it. You would then have to either assign it a value or take out the print statement.
How much was the for?
400. All right. For loops are 500. In this case, a for loop can't be directly translated into a while loop. Meaning, when can you not translate a for loop into a while loop? Yes. When can you, the question is saying in this case you cannot translate a for loop into a while loop. Most of the time you can translate a for loop into a while loop, and sometimes you cannot. Or you can translate it, but it's not an exact translation. Yeah, again, this is one of those things that works better when it's visible. They're working on the projectors. They're swapping in our spare projector, but it's going to take some time. So essentially, if you remember, I'm going to go do this over here. If you have a for loop like this with variables declared outside the for loop, this can be directly translated into a while loop. And I actually showed, somewhere in the slides, I show an example of how to translate that into the while loop. If you actually declare a variable inside the for loop, and then you try translating it into a while loop, if you remember from the slides, it's not an exact translation. If you want, I can pull up the slides a bit later and spend some time talking about it, but that's essentially the time you can't change a for loop into a while loop. So the variable is declared actually inside the for init part. whole thing works much better when I have a projector. Okay, while loop for 400. This causes an infinite while loop.
What is when it always evaluates true?
Correct. So when your while condition is 400, when your while condition always evaluates to true, then you're going to have an infinite loop, because every time it goes up and evaluates the condition, it's true, and it's just going to keep looping around forever and ever. Okay, while is 500. How many times a while loop will iterate if the condition is initially false?
What is 0 then?
Correct. So that's 500. So if your while condition is initially false, a while loop will never actually execute the body of a loop. A do while loop does. It will do it at least once. But a while loop or a for loop will never actually execute the body of that particular loop. Miscellaneous for 400. What the question mark colon notation does. Anyone remember the question mark colon notation?
Vaguely.
Vaguely. Audience.
Don't look at your notes.
What does the question, well, the answer is what the question mark colon notation does. Yes. Good. I'll accept that. So remember that the question mark colon notation is a somewhat shorthand version of if-else. I could say, for example, in a print statement, that was 500. I could say something like x is less than y, question mark, 1, else 0. It will evaluate this. If it's true, it does what's between the question mark and the colon and gets 1. If it's false, it'll give a 0. Okay, miscellaneous for 500. Who picked the last one? Oh, I guess it's the audience. This is a daily double. How much, audience, how much you want to risk? All of it. You better phrase this as a question. How to declare a new scanner object to read from a file? How to declare a new scanner object to read from a file? Do, 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 do. Anybody? I'm sorry? The answer is how to declare a new scanner object to read from a file.
What is scanner file and equals scanner file name?
What are notes?
I think you have to accept that. So essentially, we've all seen the standard way to declare a scanner, right? Scanner standard in equals new scanner system.in. Instead of the system.in, you say new file and then some string. And that will create the scanner that reads from the file instead of reading from the keyboard. Do while loops for 400. When, for each iteration of a while loop, the Boolean expression is evaluated. Yes. So that's correct. That's 400. A do while loop evaluates the Boolean expression once and at the end of each iteration of the while loop. So it'll go through it and then it evaluates the expression before it starts on the next iteration of the while loop. Do while loops for 500. The popularity of do while as compared to while.
Ross, what is less popular?
Yes. Do while is generally less popular just because most people are used to the while loop.
Was that
that's 500. So whiles are used much more often than do whiles. Loop controls 100. What happens in a loop when a continue statement is reached?
Ross, it exits the loop. What is it exits the loop and continues with the program?
I'm sorry, that's incorrect. That's 100. What happens in a loop when a continue statement is reached? Anybody? everybody.
Daniel?
What is it breaks and reevaluates at the top of the loop?
Yes, when a continuous statement is reached, it goes on to the next iteration of the loop. So it'll immediately start executing the next time the loop goes around. That's what a continue statement does.
Was I thinking of a break?
So the next question is, what happens when a break statement is reached?
Daniel?
What is it breaks and goes on with the program?
Right. So remember, a continue statement starts the next iteration of the loop. A break will stop the loop completely and move on to the next particular statement. All right. Loop controls for 300. Whether the website provides a glossary of terms.
Kyle?
What is yes?
Yes. So I was running out of loop control questions, and I want to remind everybody that there is a glossary of terms. So as we start getting into classes that have things like accessors and mutators and instance variables and class variables, keep in mind that there's a glossary on the website. Loop controls for 400. Whether the for update is executed if the loop hits a continue. So if a for loop, obviously, hits a continue, does the I++ part get executed?
What is no?
I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
Times, yeah.
What is, yeah.
Yes. So remember, that's 300, I believe. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. So remember that if a for loop hits a continue, it's going to loop around to the next thing, but it still needs to increment, it still needs to call the for update. If you're doing triangles 1 to 10 and you hit a continue, you still want to increment the I counter and go on to the next, value of I.
He actually loses
I'm sorry, I'm used to adding
Oh, no.
Loop controls for 500. Whether the for update is executed if the loop hits a break.
Ross?
What is no?
No. So the for update part will only be executed if the loop hits a continue. It does the for update, checks the Boolean conditions, starts on the next iteration. If it hits a break, it doesn't even bother. It just goes on to the next statement. Okay, at the end of round 1, we have the audience and Kyle tied at 1,400, Ross at 1,900, and Daniel at 2,100.
I actually got 4.
So here's a question. Even though I'm expecting, looking up there, that they're not going to have the projector ready
1,700.
probably until Wednesday. Do you
You
guys
did
want to go
minus
through double
400.
Jeopardy?
You didn't subtract the 400.
Yes? Okay.
You added the 500 and subtracted, or you just added 400 and subtracted 400.
You got it wrong.
I got it wrong. I should lose another 400.
I don't know, in the middle, like I had stopped deleting from people when they got it wrong.
Yes.
But if you want me to take points off of you, okay.
1,700.
Oh. Up we change. Apparently Ross is being Daniel. Okay. So the categories in Double Jeopardy, we have nested loops, constructors again, creating classes, and methods. Audience, pick one. Methods 200. The return type when a method does not return anything.
What is
I'm
void?
sorry, audience, that was not in the form of a question.
What is What is void?
Yes, so void. If a method is not going to return anything, the return type is listed as void. Void meaning nothing, empty, that sort of thing. Methods for 400. That's definitely not going to work if I read it. It's a segment of code that I asked you to reason about.
How about constructor?
The return type of the system.out.println method.
Kyle?
What is void?
Void. So that's an example of a method that does not return a value. So when that was declared somewhere or the other, that's worth 600. That returns, that has a void return type. Constructors for 200. The 4 things that happen when I declare circle C equals new circle.
creates the reference, what is it? Creates the reference point C. Reference point C points to a new circle, and the circle is initialized with the default values of the constructor.
Close enough. So remember that when we say circle C equals new circle, 4 things happen. It creates the reference, it creates the object, it makes a reference point to the object, and it calls the appropriate constructor. And every time you're creating a method in that way, that's 200. Every time you're creating an object in that way, it's going to call, do those 4 things. Constructors are 400. This is how you tell the default constructor from the rest of the constructors.
Kyle?
Whether it takes in parameters. Whether it takes in parameters, excuse me.
Okay. So the default constructor has no parameters. There is nothing between the parentheses. A specific constructor, and there can be many of them, take 1 or more parameters. We're going to see why it's called default and specific in a bit. But essentially that's the difference between them. Constructors for 600. This is how you tell a specific constructor from the rest of the constructors.
What is, it does take in parameters.
Yeah, so yeah, this is just what I rambled off about just now. A specific, 600, yes. A specific constructor takes in 1 or more parameters. Default constructor takes in no parameters. Nested loops for 200. The outer loop executes m times. The inner loop executes n times. This is the number of times the inner loop body executes.
What is m times n?
Correct. So if you have some loop that goes, 1 to 10, 200, and another loop inside that goes 1 to 20, the innermost bodies can execute 200 or 10 times 20 times. Nested loops for 400. Given 3 nested for loops, each which goes from 0 to 9, the number of times the innermost body is executed. So given 3 nested for loops, each which goes from 0 to 9, the number of times the innermost loop, the innermost body is executed.
What is 729 times?
I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
That was a 400 question?
Yeah. So keep in mind when it goes from 0 to 9, it's really a total of 10 times. Right? Because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
What is 1,000?
Yes, so it's 1,000. So you had the right idea. So again, anytime you have nested loops, you multiply the number of times that each one executes, and that's the total for the innermost body. If each part of the 3 nested loops executes 10 times, the innermost body will execute 1,000 times.
What if the inner body, you said they were 9,
0 to 9.
0 to 9.
Each loop went from 0 to 9.
Can you repeat that question?
Okay, so nested loops for 600. It's going to work again. I'm so excited. Yeah, probably will.
Not for another 10 minutes, though.
You have 2 minutes of starting right now.
2 minutes.
No, it's going to go 10 minutes.
Think so?
It's going to go 10 minutes and then crash.
It is, but I can't seem to get my laptop. Oh, wait. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, no. Okay, thanks. This is one of those questions I had shown a picture in a previous semester. I don't think I've shown a picture in this semester. So, anybody want to try to guess?
Yeah, no.
No, not black.
Natural color.
Brown. Yes, I kind of ran out of nested loop questions to ask. All right.
What?
What the hell was that?
I think my scorekeeper needs a little math.
That was a 1,400 point question.
Okay, audience, close enough. Audience, pick one. Methods for 800. Access and methods usually start with this word.
Yes.
What is get?
What is get? Access methods are generally like get radius, get height, something like this. Not always, but for this course, that's I think what we're going to see.
What was that for?
I'm sorry?
What was that for?
That was all. Sorry, let's see. Yeah, that was wrong.
I'll take method first out.
Mutative methods usually start with this word.
Kyle.
What is set?
Yes. So most mutator methods are going to start with set. Set radius, set height. There's 1,000. Set radius, set height, stuff like that.
Gotta pay attention.
Okay.
Let's have constructor. No, constructor rate. Yeah.
This is the basic purpose of a constructor.
Kyle.
Create an object. So what if you create a new object?
Close, but not quite. Okay, anybody else? I'm looking for a slightly different answer. This is sort of a what am I thinking type of thing. Well, that's why I will take points off. I don't know what I'm thinking half the time. Okay, the purpose of a constructor is primarily to initialize the instance variables of that particular object.
So, hang on here.
Oh, I guess I have to accept it. I don't know. I'm glad I know my 800 Java. So what it should say, I mean, primarily, the thing is created and the constructor is called to initialize that particular object. All right. So I don't know what I'm talking about. Pick.
Next one, 1,000.
This is when Java will automatically include a default constructor. I don't think we've seen this yet, but we'll go through it anyway. So I'll answer this. The reason it's called a default constructor is if you don't, so the default constructor, remember, has no parameters. If you don't include any constructors in your code whatsoever, Java will put one in there by default, hence default constructor. So if you don't include any constructors, you don't include a default constructor, you don't include a specific constructor, Java sticks one in there by default. We haven't quite seen this yet. So, yeah, it's not necessary for the test.
Constructors again.
The number of default constructors a class may have.
Kyle.
What is one?
Remember, it can only have one constructor. Anytime you have multiple constructors, Java tells them apart, Java tells them apart by their parameter list. So you can't have two constructors with the exact same parameter list. And if the parameter list is empty, meaning there's no parameters, you can't have two constructors with no parameters. So, the number of specific constructors a class may have.
Daniel.
What is as many as need or want?
Yes. You can have as many, you can put 100 specific constructors inside your class if you so choose. Your pick.
Specific constructors again.
This is what the constructor must be named.
Daniel.
What is the name of the class?
Yes, remember that the way Java knows it's a constructor is because the name of the class is the exact same as the name of the method. So if the class is class circle, the constructor must also be called circle with the same capitalization scheme.
Constructors again.
This is what the return type of a constructor must be.
Daniel.
What is there isn't a return type?
Correct. Remember that constructors Java considers them kind of special methods. So Java doesn't, you cannot specify a return type for a constructor. Java knows that it's a constructor, so it's not going to bother with it. So you just say public circle. You don't say public void circle or anything like that.
Constructors again.
The visibility of all constructors as far as we have seen.
Daniel.
What is public?
That's correct. So, again, we haven't quite seen the difference between public and private. We'll probably see that this Friday.
Creating classes.
This is what behaviors are translated into for classes. methods. So keep in mind that anytime you have behaviors, that's translated into a method when you actually implement it in Java. And properties and attributes are probably the next question. This is what attributes or properties are translated into.
What are variables?
Right. So properties or attributes of something are translated into instance variables or fields or something along those lines. So if you have a circle, a property or an attribute would be the radius, right? How big it is. So that's going to get translated into a instance variable. Double radius equals 1. Whereas a behavior, compute area, gets translated into a method, for example. Access of methods do this for an object.
What is returning a variable? A certain variable.
Oh, let's have that. So access of methods allow you to access an object's properties. Get radius, for example, will return the radius of the circle. It allows you to get access to a private field. And again, we haven't really seen much about private yet. Mutator methods do this for an object.
What is alter the properties of an object?
A mutator method will allow you to change some property of an object. That was a filter for file. To change some property of an object. So a set radius, for example, will allow you to modify the radius of the given circle. 1,000? Okay, daily double. How much would you like, Kyle?
Let's do
Let's come on.
2,000. No, let's do 2,000.
Do all of it.
I want to do that 2,000. Yeah.
This is how you determine if a method is a facilitator method or not.
Whether or not it, or what is whether or not it refers to a specific object? Or
Sorry, that's not correct.
yeah,
So,
that's why
in this terminology, we have accessors and mutators. We've talked about that. We have constructors. Anything that's not one of those three is considered a facilitator. So this is just a fancy name. I don't like it all that much. I bring it up because it does appear in some of the text that we will read about it. So, nested loops for 800. In nested loops, the loop that a break or continue applies to.
It's sort of a type.
What?
Stop again.
What is a while loop?
Yes, but if you have nested loops, which one?
What is what is the outermost?
I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
I mean, that's the first time. What is the interval?
So if you have a series of nested loops and you have hit a break or a while, a break or a continue, it's going to apply to the most recently entered loop. So whichever one was most recently entered, that's the one that the break or the while applies to. And my favorite course.
What is CS101?
That's correct. And you failed. That's right. I'll see you on Wednesday. Good luck studying. There's a new session tonight.
Takes in a parameter, when that method is called, that value is supplied to the parameter. Instance and class variables, meaning something defined within a class, such as the fuel, the x position, the y position, and the color of the car class. Again, the difference between the instance variable and class variable I'm ignoring for now. Those are all initialized to default values. Numbers to 0, booleans to false, and, yeah, you're not working anyway, objects to null. So keep in mind that sometimes Java will initialize it, sometimes it won't. And we will start the circle class on Friday. I will see you all then.